Live from WBFF in Baltimore, this is Fox 45 News at 4.
What an amazing night and what an improbable journey. You believe that in this moment our state could go faster. You believe that in this moment our state would not wait its turn. And you believed in the son of an immigrant.
Well, the day after an historic election in Maryland, we are looking ahead to what it all means for our state.
Wes Moore will become the first black governor in Maryland's history and only the third in the nation. Also making history, Anthony Brown will be the first black man to hold the state's top law enforcement position as Attorney General. They are the first two black Marylanders elected to statewide office.
And Brooke Learman becomes the first woman to hold Maryland's Comptroller's office.
Thank you to the grandmas, to the mothers, to the daughters who said it's time for a woman to run the money in Maryland.
Sounds good, doesn't it? Well, at least to me.
Yes, indeed. I hear you. I understand.
I understand. Well, the votes may be cast and most races called, but the storylines continue to unfold today. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mary Bubala.
And I'm Kai Jackson. Well, we have team coverage this afternoon. Coming up, the race for Anne Arundel County Executive comes down to mail-in ballots. Amy Simpson lets us know why we may not know a winner until a week after Election Day.
Democrats have control of all statewide offices for the first time in 8 years. Maxine Stryker looks at what we can expect in a one-party state.
But first, voters in Baltimore City overwhelmingly chose independence and accountability for elected leaders. Fox 45's Mackenzie Frost is live and tells us what that means and has reaction from the mayor. Mackenzie?
Yeah, Kai and Mary, from an independent watchdog to really term limits for elected leaders, Baltimore City voters making their voices very clear yesterday at the polls. And now it appears as if city council members are poised to make it even easier for themselves to earn a pension. Good morning. Baltimore City voters turning out to the polls, casting their ballots for independence.
I is for Independent Advisory Board.
Question I, creating a truly independent oversight board of the city's inspector general, the watchdog, rooting out waste, fraud, and corruption in the halls of city government.
If you want a strong inspector general, if you want a strong watchdog for the city, they have to be independent.
Instead of politicians overseeing the IG, the board will be made up of people from across Baltimore, passing with 86% of the vote, and ballots are still being counted.
This is a really exciting time in Baltimore City for independence.
David Williams, taxpayer protection advocate, says all eyes are on Baltimore, and this time it's a good thing.
Right now, Baltimore City is the envy of the country.
In the final days leading up to the election, Council President Nick Mosby changing the rules of the game, introducing a bill changing the city's pension requirements, making elected leaders eligible for a payout after 8 years in office instead of 12. While the city's first responders must work 25 years to become eligible for a pension. The council president tying the bill to question K, implementing term limits for the leaders.
As council members, as elected officials, if the citizens of Baltimore vote that they don't want you to be in office for 16 or 20 or 24 years, I think it is prudent of us to be in alignment with where the motivation of the city is. Voters
overwhelmingly telling Baltimore City electeds they don't want them serving more than 2 terms in the same office. Question K, passing with 72% of the vote. And because the council fast-tracked their pension plan in about 3 weeks, the entire council now poised to pass the bill.
This is the most self-serving piece of legislation that I have seen.
Fox 45 News asking some of the members who supported the bill just this week, why?
I work hard in the city for my constituents.
Councilman Robert Stokes not shy about his desire to draw a pension.
I bring money to my constituents. Only job I have.
Stokes' claim remains in question. Fox 45 News finding a slew of bills and resolutions with Stokes' name attached, mostly as a co-sponsor, and the majority of the bills, oversight hearings. Stokes is the same councilman who called an investigative hearing into ghost student and grade-changing news uncovered by Fox 45's Project Baltimore only not to ask city schools about it.
Why not you ask the hard questions?
Because I'm setting the tone. My tone is to be able to talk about school performance.
Stokes also refusing to attend Fox 45's town hall held in his district, talking about crime, which was one of the most dangerous council districts in all of Baltimore. And now, if approved by the council, he'll earn a pension. Right now, Stokes earns nearly $74,000 a year. We sent him a couple of questions via email Wednesday, asking, what bills have you sponsored and gotten adopted that impact your constituents directly? What money are you referring to when you say you, quote, bring money to your constituents? The councilman ignoring the questions, refusing to provide more details. Meanwhile, Mayor Brandon Scott issuing a lengthy statement about Election Day, but he doesn't mention Question K and term limits set to become reality. Fox 45 News, though, catching up with the mayor in South Baltimore.
Listen, I supported term limits and voted term limits twice. So for me, we know that the voters have spoken. I wish we would have made that decision to have term limits 4 years ago and before that, when I voted on it before that, and now we just have to make sure that all the other regulations fall in line with it.
Mayor Brandon Scott says he hasn't had time to look at the pension plan, so it's unclear if he will sign it.
Now, we're still waiting to see when that pension plan will be up for a final vote inside City Hall. But based on yesterday's results on Election Day, it's clear that Baltimore City voters are sending a message to the people who they elect to serve them. They say that they want transparency, independence, and accountability. Live in Baltimore, Mackenzie Frost, Fox 45 News.
Mackenzie, thank you. We want to know what you think. Should elected city leaders give themselves pensions after 8 years instead of current 12? So far, 75% say keep it at 12 years. Go to foxbaltimore.com, click on the Pulse tab to cast your vote.
In statewide races, Democrat Wes Moore, as we mentioned, defeated Dan Cox to win the governor's race. He received about 2/3 of the vote. Cox called Moore to concede this afternoon. And we saw those margins in most of the statewide races. Democrat Anthony Brown won the race for Attorney General with more than 60% of the vote.
Democrat Brooke Learman will become the state's first female comptroller, holding off Republican Harford County Executive Barry Glassman. She will join us live in studio in about 10 minutes. And with the election of Democrat Governor Wes Moore, the state is once again going to be headed to a one-party control. Fox 45's Maxine Stryker joins us live to talk about what this means for you, the taxpayer. Maxine?
Well, Mary, Democrats really swept the state, not only with the election of Democratic Governor Wes Moore, but with Brooke Learman as the comptroller and Anthony Brown as the state attorney general. This leaves Republicans outnumbered 2-1 in Annapolis. Political analyst John Deedy says with Democrats doing so, Annapolis is now under one-party rule.
There was a lot of things Democrats wanted to do over the last 8 years they couldn't do because Governor Hogan opposed those things. Now, I think a lot of those things are going to be on the fast track. You're going to see a Dagwood sandwich of legislation in this coming session.
All right, I like that reference. Maxine, what will this mean for Republicans now?
I'm glad you got that. Well, they're seemingly, Mary, they're fighting an uphill battle without Governor Hogan at the helm any longer. And Deedy says they're really going to have to pick and choose what they decide to fight for. We caught up with Senate President Bill Ferguson earlier today. He says just because there's going to be one-party rule, it doesn't necessarily mean everybody is going to get along and agree on everything.
Of course, there's a number of things that Democrats disagree with each other on. And so, the legislative process is built to take into account lots of different perspectives, and I'm confident that we're going to be able to do great work on behalf of Marylanders.
Well, last time the state was under one-party rule was 8 years ago under Governor Martin O'Malley. Reporting live in Baltimore, Maxine Stryker, Fox 45 News.
Maxine, thank you. That brings us to our other question of the day. Are you concerned about one-party rule in Maryland, something we last had in 2015? So far, 84% of those who responded say yes. Make sure your voice is heard by going to foxbaltimore.com/vote.
It was a banner night for Maryland Democrats at the top of the ticket. One of Maryland's U.S. congressmen is in a fight for his seat tonight. With 72% of the precincts reporting, Republican State Delegate Neil Parrott has a slim lead over incumbent Congressman David Trone, a Democrat. The New York Times reports many of the ballots left to count are from Montgomery County, which is traditionally a Democratic stronghold in the state. At City Hall today, the Department of Public Works is in the hot seat. City officials are demanding a return to weekly recycling pickup. Fox 45's Rebecca Pryor reports critics say the agency needs to get weekly recycling going again right now. Rebecca.
Yeah, Guy, it's been almost a year since the city has had weekly recycling. And while DPW is blaming a lack of staff, city officials that I spoke with say the real problem is a lack of leadership.
How close we are to being sufficiently staffed to meet the needs of the department.
It's a timeline question being asked time.
We deserve core city services.
And time again.
How many physical people are we short today?
City officials pressing the Department of Public Works for a return to weekly recycling. But since cutting back services in January, claiming COVID-fueled staffing shortages, DPW still has no concrete plans put in place.
It's a challenge hiring throughout the nation. We're no different.
DPW Director Jason Mitchell saying a timeline can't be determined until the department finishes a months-long route optimization data report.
We'll definitely have that in the report next month.
But you can't even give an estimate. You said that you're planning for it.
Yes, so the report provides all that information.
Meanwhile, DPW admitting today they're down 700 employees, many of them CDL drivers. Online job postings suggest the city is offering between $40 to $50K for the position. This compared to a quick search on salary.com showing that's on the low end, with the average salary for CDL drivers in Baltimore close to $60K. When questioned about the disparity, Director Mitchell, who makes $245,000 a year, says DPW's current pay scale is a work in progress.
Yeah, we are. We're working with HR on potentially salary survey so we can assess our pay compared to the industry, as well as bonuses is something that we're looking at.
What we're seeing is that the money is going to people in the executive and higher level positions are making way more than they need to be making. And the workers who are actually physically doing the work are being underpaid.
Regardless, Councilman Yitzi Slifer says the root of the problem isn't a lack of staff. He believes it's a lack of leadership.
There needs to be somebody who's thinking long term, who's responsible to solve these issues. And they have not felt a sense of urgency to fill that position.
Pointing to one position in particular, for over a year now, DPW has failed to hire a head of solid waste, to which Yitzi says without someone in charge of that department, challenges will likely continue.
This is long past the level of unacceptable. This is complete incompetence.
And to help combat the reduction to recycling collections, DPW did just open up a new drop-off location in Northwest Baltimore. For more information, you can go to their website at publicworks.baltimore.gov. Reporting live in Baltimore, Rebecca Pryor, Fox 45 News.
Wes Moore wins his first election and becomes governor of Maryland in the process. Coming up, his priorities for when he's sworn in.
And next, as Brooke Learman prepares to become Maryland Comptroller, she joins us live in studio to discuss her plans to modernize the office.
Fox 45 News, winner of 17 2022 Regional Emmy Awards, more than all other Baltimore news stations combined.
For our democracy to work, we need to believe in and put our trust in a government that works well for all of us. And our government is only as good as the people we elect.
In the race for state comptroller, Delegate Brooke Learman defeats Harford County Executive Barry Glassman. She's up by 16 points with 86% of the vote counted.
And as we noted at the top of our newscast, Learman joins a slate of candidates making history in Maryland as the first female comptroller in state history. And she joins us live via Zoom. Our bad, Brooke. We thought that maybe you were coming in here. And
Don't worry, I'm happy to be here in whatever capacity.
No, we are happy to have you. And I'm sure you're exhausted for sure. I'm sure it was a late, great night for you. Let's start with the historic nature of this race. What does it say to you that the state voted for such a diverse set of elected leaders?
I think it shows that the people of Maryland, that Marylanders were ready to elect bold, new, innovative leaders. And, you know, we traveled around the state. I certainly have, for the past 2 years, been traveling around the state talking to Marylanders about the importance of the comptroller's office and about how this office and the resources of this office can really lift up Maryland families, businesses, and communities and build more financial resilience. And you know, I know my colleagues, Wes and Aruna and Anthony, we all did. And so I think Maryland was ready for more diverse leadership, bold leadership with innovative ideas to really move us forward.
Madam Comptroller-elect, one of the things that we want to talk about is obviously leadership is one thing, getting things done is something else. One of the projects that a lot of people have been disappointed about was the Red Line project in Baltimore. That would have really assisted working class black families from the east side of Baltimore all the way into Baltimore County. Got canceled by Governor Hogan. The feds had $900 million coming. Do you know if the governor-elect and you and others in the legislature are on board to try and restart this program, which black Baltimoreans in particular who don't have access to good public transportation have really been hurt by the lack of this project and this transportation? Will you try and restart it? Because we are hearing there's some people who would like to see it restarted.
Yes, absolutely. You know, I was actually a member of the citywide Citizens Advisory Council for the Red Line for several years before it was canceled. I ran on a pro-Red Line platform when I was first running for the House of Delegates back in 2014. And we know that commute time is the single strongest factor in the odds of escaping poverty. And commute times in West Baltimore and East Baltimore, they're so long. They're too long. And in order for Baltimore and our region to really meet its full potential, we need a thriving, effective, efficient, and safe transit system. And so absolutely, I think there's a strong commitment to move forward with the Red Line, to make sure that we're along with the Red Line, thinking through our entire transit system in Baltimore. And I'm excited to be a part of that.
I think I heard his voice in one of your commercials. How much do you plan to lean on your predecessor, longtime comptroller Peter Francho, as you transition into this office? And then what are some of your top priorities?
Peter Francho has been an important leader in the state of Maryland for many years, and of course has been our comptroller for 16 years. And I really want to build on the work that he's done at putting Marylanders at the focus, right? We want to have the best customer service of any tax agency in the country. We want to be modernizing the programs that exist in the comptroller's office so that we can do that. And I look forward to working with him over the next, several months to make sure that we're building a great team, that we're learning about what's working, what's coming, and what more we need to do in the comptroller's office to really serve the people of Maryland in the best possible way. I think any great leader has to first and foremost be a listener. And so I'm excited to meet with the folks in the comptroller's office, meet with Marylanders around the state, have a strong transition team to make sure that we're hitting the ground running come January.
All right. Comptroller-elect Brooke Learman, thank you so much for joining us via Zoom today. We appreciate it. Next time we'll have you in studio.
Next time I'll come in studio. Thank you so much. I look forward to it.
Thanks.
Breaking news to report right now. President Joe Biden is speaking after what many political observers say was a very good night for his party. Let's listen in.
In the months of January, February, March of next year, it's just getting underway. So I'm optimistic about how the public's going to even be more embracive of what we've done. Historic investments that are leading companies to invest literally hundreds of billions of dollars combined to build semiconductor factories and other advanced manufacturing here in America. It's going to create tens of thousands of good-paying jobs. And by the way, a significant number of those jobs are going to be jobs that pay average $126,000, $127,000. You don't need a college degree to get those jobs. And we're dealing with global inflation as a result of the pandemic and Putin's war in Ukraine. We're also handling it better than most other advanced nations in the world. We're lowering gas.
It's President Joe Biden speaking after election night. We'll have full coverage of the president's speech throughout the evening and online on our website, foxbaltimore.com.
A real beauty today, but we are looking forward to, or maybe not so much looking forward to, the impacts of Nicole potentially on Maryland. It's now a tropical storm, could become a hurricane before it makes a landfall eventually late tonight into early tomorrow in Florida, east coast of Florida. We've got hurricane warnings up. But for us, it's going to be really a shadow of its former self by the time it gets here. But Friday into early Saturday, that's when we will watch for impacts. With it making a path to our west, or at least the remnant moisture making a path to our west, could be an inch or two of rain. Doesn't look like the biggest totals we've seen around here. But there will be some gusty breezes, maybe 20 to maybe even up to 40 miles an hour and some gusts, especially if you get a thunderstorm or two. And there is, with that type of path going off to our west, a low and severe weather risk. So that is something that we will watch, but it's only a marginal risk of severe weather that is here. But again, it is always something we watch when we do have severe potential, especially in November. Hurricane warning in effect again for portions of the central Florida coastline. And as you zoom in, real quiet along the East Coast until you get down to Florida. And there's a center right now of Nicole as it's moving its way from east to west towards the Florida coastline, actually over the Bahamas right now, and probably making a landfall again tonight. For now, we're under fair weather high pressure, real nice. Temperatures only in the mid to upper 50s, though, today with kind of a northeasterly wind kicking in. There are the high winds and rain down to the south. Actually going to be picked up by this weather maker, which has put down inches of rain, welcome rain over the west coast, and feet of snow in the mountains of the west. This cold front is going to move east, pick this thing up, and shove it in our direction. Now, the thing is, by the time that happens, no, it's not going to be a Category 1 hurricane. No, it's not going to be a tropical storm. This thing's going to spend a lot of time over land. So by the time it makes its move northbound, we're not even tracking it anymore as really a distinct system. It's just kind of remnants. And we potentially, again, could get about up to 1.5 inches of rain, give or take. And there is that marginal risk, or the 1 out of 5 risk of severe weather. And really the biggest thing that we'd see, again, are some wind gusts and potentially an outside chance, a low risk of tornadoes that comes out of that. 56 right now here in Baltimore, winds out of the east-southeast at 6 miles an hour. Behind that system, when it comes through, boy, things are really going to chill down. For now, temperature settling into the 40s and 50s overnight. Tomorrow at 68, 69. Remnants in a cold move through Friday into early Saturday. And then that moves out, and look at that cold air behind it. 40s to near 50 for highs.
If we stand divided, we cannot win. But if we stand united, we cannot lose.
After an historic night in Maryland, Mackenzie Frost is one-on-one with Governor-elect Wes Moore. And next, despite efforts to free her, Brittany Griner has moved to a penal colony in Russia. What we still don't know about her whereabouts right now. Making headlines today, the woman who killed the man she said raped her as a teenager is back in custody after walking away from an Iowa probation facility. Piper Lewis, who was 15 years old, sex trafficking victim at the time of the murder, left the facility last week and cut off her ankle monitor. She's on probation after pleading guilty to voluntary manslaughter and willful injury. The Iowa Department of Corrections has yet to comment on her escape. Brittany Griner is in a penal colony in Russia, according to her legal team. She was transferred from a detention center on the 4th, but they don't know her exact location. This comes after a Russian court rejected her appeal of the 9-year sentence she received last month for drug possession. The court convicted the WNBA star and Olympic medalist in August. Griner admitted she accidentally put cannabis oil in her luggage, which police found at a Moscow airport. Baltimore's elected leaders now term limited to 8 years in one seat. Coming up, why some are concerned over council members' response to city voters making that decision. And it may take some time before we know who's going to lead Anne Arundel County for the next 4 years. Why election leaders there expect at least a week-long process to count every vote.
Beyond the podium, Wes Moore, now the governor-elect in Maryland, and will become the first black chief executive in state history.
Fox 45's Mackenzie Frost spoke with Moore today about what's next for the administration. She joins us live with that interview. Mackenzie?
Yeah, Mary Kai, so I spoke with Wes Moore right after he hung up the phone with Delegate Dan Cox, who called earlier this afternoon to concede the race. And Moore says he's ready to get to work, and one of the top priorities he'll be tackling is crime. Governor-elect Wes Moore not wasting time talking with reporters about his details for his administration. First, taking the concession call from Delegate Dan Cox.
He said coming into the election that he wasn't sure if he was going to concede. So I'm really grateful that that Delegate Cox decided to make the concession, and I'm excited to move forward now.
Now looking to reach out to everyone in Maryland, letting them know he says he's ready to start building his plans.
We have to be able to build an economy that grows. We have to be able to have an economy that is participatory, that people have a chance to participate in that economy. And that does include people who I might not have been their choice for governor, but I hope to be able to earn their support over these next 8 years.
8 years. Looking already to a second term?
I'm excited because I know this is Maryland's decade. This is going to be our time. It's going to be our time to build. It's going to be our time to grow. It's going to be our time to compete. Maryland will compete, and Maryland will win. And I don't think there's a difference between saying we're going to be more competitive and be more equitable as if we have to choose. It's not a choice. We are going to do both.
The first thing that you talked about when you were looking at the administration was crime and public safety.
Yes.
And obviously in Baltimore, that is something that weighs heavily on the minds of voters. How do you plan to move that forward? And what do you think are some of the first priorities in that realm of public safety that you think you can get done?
If you don't get public safety right, nothing else is going to work. Because if people don't feel safe, they're not going to stay and they're not going to come. So it is the #1 priority that we've got to drill in and we've got to focus on. We've got to make sure we are getting and keeping violent offenders off of our streets.
One of the priorities for the current administration in Annapolis was the violent firearms offender bill. It didn't get through the General Assembly, targeting those repeat violent offenders. Is that something that you would look at again coming up for this next session?
It is something we are going to look at, because we've got to prioritize not just getting these firearms and illegal guns off of our streets. It's also about going after the people who continue to bring them into communities.
Hours after Moore became the first black governor in Maryland, Governor Larry Hogan called to congratulate, along with President Joe Biden. Can you explain a little bit about that conversation that you had with President Biden? And then do you have your transition team set and ready to go?
Yeah, so I was thankful that the president called last night to congratulate me, and he said what he said actually the night before when he was here in Maryland. What he said, I'm excited about Maryland. I'm excited about what you guys are doing. And I think it's really humbling to know that the President of the United States also understands that this is going to be Maryland's decade, and that starts now. And so you all will see that in short order, we are going to be announcing what the transition and transformation team is going to look like for the Moore-Miller administration.
And we also learned that tomorrow, Governor Larry Hogan will be meeting with Wes Moore in Annapolis to talk about that transition. And then there will be an opportunity for the media to ask some questions and hopefully get some answers about what that looks like. So we could be learning more about the transition and the transformation, as Wes Moore puts it, later tomorrow. Live in Baltimore, Mackenzie Frost, Fox 45 News.
Mackenzie, thank you. Well, also in our Vote 2022 coverage, Marylanders voted overwhelmingly to approve the use of recreational marijuana. Starting next July, anyone 21 and up will be allowed to carry up to 1.5 ounces of pot and grow up to 2 plants out of public view. People with previous marijuana convictions will also be able to file a petition for expungement. Maryland officially joins 19 states and 3 territories that have legalized adult recreational use. And legalization was also on the ballot in several other states last night. According to the Associated Press, a ballot initiative legalizing recreational use also passed in Missouri. Meanwhile, voters in North Dakota and Arkansas rejected it.
Baltimore City voters also decided to term limit their politicians. Question K passed by a large margin, barring elected leaders from serving more than 8 years in any one office. Now, city council members are working to fast-track a bill that would allow them to collect a pension after serving those 2 terms. This morning, Megan Gillen spoke with a lifelong city resident about why he thinks this move is inappropriate.
Baltimore City Council now one step closer to fast-tracking a bill that would shorten the number of years of service needed for city elected leaders to be eligible for a pension. The bill passing a second reader this week in a 9-2 vote with 3 abstaining. Lifelong city resident and Baltimore pastor P.M. Smith weighing in.
If approved, this legislation would allow elected officials to receive a pension after 8 years of service instead of 12. What are your thoughts?
Disappointed but not surprised. We have folk who would not support term limits, so the public speaks, and then they take action to preempt the public. Where else can you get a lifetime pension for a part-time job? It's theft. It's immoral. It's a me first mentality. And I'm glad you put that up. These are the persons who supported that.
Councilman Robert Stokes of District 12 is among those supporting the measure, and he explains his position, saying everybody that works in these positions should have access to a pension. From here, the legislation now heads to a third reader. I'm Megan Gillen, Fox 45 News.
Well, we may not yet know who will be the next Anne Arundel County executive for another week. Right now, Republican challenger Jessica Hare holds a lead of more than 10,000 votes, but there are still tens of thousands of votes left to be counted. Amy Simpson joins us live with what we can expect as this continues to unfold. Amy?
Yeah, Mary, so it's coming down to those mail-in ballots in Anne Arundel County. And as of this morning, the Anne Arundel County Board of Elections said it had received more than 45,000 mail-in ballots, and they were expecting a high volume of those timely ballots to arrive today. I spoke with County Executive Stuart Pittman, the incumbent. He told me today he expected this to happen and feels confident about the outcome of the race, saying a majority of those mail-in ballots were returned by Democratic voters. Meanwhile, his opponent, Republican Jessica Hare's campaign, did not respond to our interview request today, but yesterday out at those polls, she sounded optimistic.
We're just going to wait for every vote to be counted, and we're excited to see it.
We asked our people to vote early, vote by mail, get your mail-in ballots in, and they did, and that's why we're behind now. But that's okay, because what really matters is who's on top at the very end.
Indeed. Well, Amy, how long is it going to take to count all these mail-in ballots in Anne Arundel County?
Okay, so we're going to have to do some math here, Mary, but the Board of Elections tells me it can count about 15,000 of those ballots in an 8-hour day of them canvassing ballots. Canvassing is supposed to start tomorrow, but with 45,000 ballots already returned and more incoming, that's already at least 3 days of counting. They'll start tomorrow. They'll count for 8 hours tomorrow. They say no counting on Friday due to Veterans Day, which already puts us into next week before we learn a final outcome. Reporting live tonight, Amy Simpson, Fox 45 News.
A former Baltimore County Schools educator is echoing the message of others: get the violence in schools under control. A few years ago, this educator tried to break up a fight, but while that was happening, they were pulled to the ground by a student who came from behind. After the fight, the educator was treated for back and head injuries, but as the physical wounds healed, mental ones started to emerge. As time went by, feelings of panic, stress, and anxiety began to creep in for this educator.
I think people take for granted how violence in schools can impact individuals. Kids get hurt too, adults get hurt. It's not something to be taken lightly.
Well, tonight at 10 o'clock, Project Baltimore speaks with a therapist about school violence, why she says it makes sense this issue has gotten worse. In a city in crisis, the NAACP is questioning whether the Baltimore police officer who shot and killed Tyree Moorhead, the creator of no-shoot zones, used excessive force.
Just yesterday, BPD released body-worn camera footage of the shooting that happened Sunday in West Baltimore.
Alexa Ashwell has the video, and we do want to warn you, it is very disturbing to watch.
The circle, again, showing the large butcher knife the individual had in his hand.
Here, a still image from an officer's body-worn camera. Investigators detailing it shows Tyree Moorhead on top of a woman and armed with a large knife. This happening seconds before the officer opened fire on Moorhead after arriving to the scene and ordering him to the ground. The commissioner releasing the footage. Fox 45 News choosing to freeze the video after the shots are fired, but not the audio.
Get down! Get down! Get down!
The footage captures the officer firing a total of 14 rounds. Some of those shots after Moorhead had rolled away from the woman, but was still armed with the knife. The commissioner questioned on the use of force.
Are those gunshots justified, and please explain?
That will, it would be inappropriate for me to answer that before the conclusion of the investigation. That's why we have an investigation, and the investigation will produce a finding that would likely articulate the answer to that question.
The commissioner waiting on the outcome of the investigation, saying an officer's actions are based off of the immediacy and severity of a threat.
That officer had to assess that with the time that officer had. What I can say without compromising the integrity of the investigation, and I think it's clear to all of us, that the lady who was in danger's life was saved. We cannot and should not render a disposition on the investigation while it's under investigation.
The NAACP responding to the release of the video, posing several questions, including, and in part, is that use of force justified, or is this a case of excessive force? And what are the changes to training or policy that BPD will need to implement as a result of this incident? The commissioner today not publicly responding to those questions, reiterating what happened here at the corner of Fulton and Lafayette remains under investigation. Alexa Ashwell, Fox 45 News.
Now, the department has identified that officer as Zachary Rutherford. He's been with the Baltimore Police Department for 8 months and has a total of 3 years law enforcement experience. The commissioner says both he and the other officer who was present who didn't fire his weapon, have been placed on administrative duties pending the outcome of the investigation. This is a protocol procedure.
He likes to play the role of kingmaker, but former President Trump's role in the party under some scrutiny after election results left some Republicans underwhelmed. I'm Scott Thuman in Washington with what that means.
And the commute this evening, another quiet one. Temperatures falling through the cool 50s, but we've got some rain, maybe even some strong storms on the way with Nicole pushing up the coast. I'm going to let you know when it could get here and what you're going to see in my Weather Authority forecast.
Well, election night looks like it might drag out into election month. And while there's no definitive answer yet on who will gain control of the House and Senate, one thing is clear. A sweeping Republican takeover or red wave red wave, isn't quite forming like some thought it might. Sinclair's chief political correspondent Scott Thuman has more.
All right, well, plenty to digest and still a lot of figuring out to do. But if we're talking candidates, look here. Pennsylvania, a top Trump selection, loses. Up north, New Hampshire, another Trump endorsement falls short. Down here in Georgia, one of Trump's favorite selections, still duking it out. Accusations that the former president actually weakened some of that momentum for the predicted red wave.
We will be in the majority, and Nancy Pelosi will be in the minority.
Republicans chalked up plenty of wins, but also more disappointments than expected, and some pointing the finger at one man in particular.
They kept saying, well, he's good on nominations, but is he good on the general election?
The New York Times writing, since 2016, Trump's political style has resulted in more collateral damage for fellow conservatives than electoral success. He was the first president in decades to lose the House, the Senate, and the White House within 4 years.
Definitely not a Republican wave, that's for darn sure.
And with many speculating Trump will kick off a third run at the White House next week, there are worries it could cost Republicans the Senate. There will be a runoff between Democrat Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker December 6th. For Republicans, it's eerily reminiscent of 2020, as Democrats flipped both seats and, by default, the Senate itself. Voters fed up with Trump, part of that reason. The other lesson this election could be messaging. While Republicans harped on the country's economic woes, did they offer enough specific solutions?
We have Joe Biden, who is the least popular president since Harry Truman, since presidential polling happened, and there wasn't a red wave. The Republican Party needs to do a really deep introspection look in the mirror right now, because this is an absolute disaster.
Wins or losses across this map, for better or worse, experts suggest it was unmistakably shaped and steered by Trump. In Washington, I'm Scott Thuman.
All right, looking ahead to potential impacts from Nicole, now a tropical storm, almost a hurricane just east of Florida. This would happen Friday into early Saturday, and maybe even on Saturday, a cold front swinging through with a couple more showers. An inch or two of rain in total. Gusty breezes, maybe 20 to up to about 30, maybe locally 40 miles an hour in gusts. And then with us being on the eastern side of this, that puts us on the potential severe weather side of the system. By then, it's going to be very, very much weakened. So don't expect anything widespread, but there is a low-end severe risk for Friday. So a hurricane warning is in effect for the east central coast of Florida right now, right around Port St. Lucie, down to about West Palm Beach. Lots of rain and wind headed their way tonight into early tomorrow. For now, fair weather high pressure is our main weather maker, keeping all of this at bay and away. But there's a cold front way out west around Denver. That is moving east. It's going to pick this thing up and move it north. Now, thankfully, it's going to be far weakened by the time it gets here. It won't be the Category 1 hurricane that it's likely to hit as tonight into early tomorrow. It'll just be a remnant low pressure system kind of stalling its way over portions of the Appalachians. Now, north and west of this, there's going to be a lot of rain. South and east, a little bit less, maybe about a ½ inch to 1.5 inches of rain around here. And that would mainly be Friday into early Saturday. And also there is a marginal or level 1 of 5 risk of severe weather out of it, too. 56 degrees, sunshine, gorgeous day after highs in the mid to upper 50s today. Winds out of the east-southeast at 6 miles an hour. That's signifying a change for the warmer and more humid. Eventually, look, the warm side of the country, east, the cold west. Look at that, Billings, Montana, only at 11 degrees. And we are cool, but we're nothing like what they're seeing out there. But we are going to correct our temperatures behind all this mess. Now, take a look overnight tonight into early tomorrow morning. We'll see just a couple of patchy clouds, 40s to around 50. Tomorrow, another day, looks like we'll probably be in the 60s with some extra clouds. And then we take care of the dry weather on Friday. Notice that rain pulling in. And it looks like that lasts into early Saturday. Again, monitoring for a marginal risk of severe weather. And then on Sunday, stray shower, cooler 51, and it stays cool all the way into early next week.
Jonathan, thank you. Coming up on Fox 45 News at 5, Democrats take control in Annapolis. What one-party rule could mean for you.
It is a controversial way of retrieving organs, and it has ignited a dying debate. I'm Liz Bonus. We share how it could, however, save hundreds of lives. It is just ahead.
Every day, 17 people die waiting for a life-saving organ transplant. But something new is being considered in several states, including Nebraska, Arizona, New York, and Ohio, that could turn things around. Medical reporter Liz Bonus has the story and why it's controversial.
Hey there, hello to you. Transplant surgeons in several hospitals are now part of clinical trials to see if we can boost the number of usable organs through what's called donation after cardiac death. It has triggered an ethical debate about life and death because it allows surgeons to retrieve organs when the body has no chance of survival, but brain death has not officially been declared.
Mommy, love you.
For those such as Kiera Hodge, it could be life-saving. She's been waiting months for a double organ transplant.
I always wanted to be a mother. God got the final say.
After the birth of her daughter Cadence, who's now 2, Kiera's heart and kidneys went into complete failure.
They gave me less than 2 years if I had to start dialysis.
Kiera is just one of the now more than 100,000 men, women, and children in the U.S. waiting for an organ donor. Most of those organs will come from people who choose to donate organs after brain death has already occurred, say after a sudden accident.
It's a gift of life from the families who have undergone tragedy.
But transplant surgeons at Ohio's Christ Hospital say this newer method could add hundreds more organs to the growing list of those in need.
It could potentially double or even more. It could be really huge.
Ohio's Life Center Organ Donor Network has formed a committee to consider it.
Anything that we can do to, again, make more organs available for those people on the wait list, that's what we're here to do.
Here's how it works. Rather than the traditional organ retrieval, where a patient is declared brain dead and warm working organs are retrieved before life support is turned off, donation after cardiac death turns life support off first. Surgeons then wait about 30 minutes for the heart to stop beating, and the patient is declared dead. They then clamp off the brain and restart the heart to remove the warm working organs.
And what we found is when we put the heart on the perfusing machine and it's beating, we can measure if it's good enough to give to a human. And the results with those hearts are at least as good, if not better, with the hearts from brain dead donors.
For some, however, this partial resurrection raises ethical questions about life and death. Dr. Dennis Sullivan is a former professor of ethics and pharmacy at Cedarville University.
You actually make an incision in the thorax and clamp the vessels that would go to the brain. This is disturbing for people because it seems like you're trying to resuscitate the patient.
The Life Center team says, however, that's not true.
They've already been declared dead, so this is not bringing somebody back to life. This is bringing their organs back to life.
Life Center says patients also need to know there's an option for organ donation when there's no chance a loved one not yet brain dead will survive.
This is not occurring with patients who have a survivable injury.
All this is one more reason, Kiera Hodge says, to make a decision about organ donation now in the event of your death.
This is my miracle baby. I didn't think I could have kids ever, so she's definitely my miracle baby.
You see, that decision might be the miracle this baby needs to keep her mother alive. To become an organ donor, you can go online and register, or you can sign up when you renew your driver's license. Be sure to tell your family your wishes. I'm medical reporter Liz Bonus. Now back to you.
Coming up on Fox 45 News at 5 o'clock, accountability for elected leaders. We break down key ballot initiatives that passed in Baltimore City. The NAACP questions if the use of force was necessary in a police-involved shooting. We'll have more coming up. Democrats make history in Maryland with big wins. What one-party rule could mean for you.
Voters pushing for accountability in government, looking into key ballot measures that passed in Baltimore.
Was it excessive force? The NAACP is questioning a deadly police-involved shooting.
Live from WBFF in Baltimore, this is Fox 45 News at 5.
Regardless of what the final tally of these elections show, and there's still some counting going on, I'm prepared to work with my Republican colleagues. The American people have made clear, I think, that they expect Republicans to be prepared to work with me as well. The future of America is too promising to be trapped in an endless political warfare.
The president speaks this afternoon as the balance of power in Washington is still up in the air. President Biden promises to work with Republicans while also vowing to block any bills that would cut Social Security or threaten abortion rights. While it looks like Republicans are closing in on a majority in the House of Representatives, key Senate races are still being decided. Election results are still too close to call in Nevada and Arizona, and Georgia now heads to a runoff election. Good evening, I'm Kai Jackson.
And I'm Mary Bubala. While critical national races are still undecided, there was an historic Democratic sweep in Maryland's elections last night. Wes Moore defeated Dan Cox and will become the first black governor in our state and only the third in American history.
What an amazing night and what an improbable journey. You believe that in this moment our state could go faster. You believe that in this moment our state would not wait its turn. And you believed in the son of an immigrant.
Also making history, Democrat Anthony Brown, who will be the first black man to hold the state's top law enforcement position as Attorney General of Maryland. And Brooke Learman becomes the first woman to hold Maryland's Comptroller's office.
Thank you to the grandmas, to the mothers, to the daughters who said it's time for a woman to run the money in Maryland.
With Democrats soon to be in control of all statewide offices for the first time in 8 years, Maxine Stryker is looking into what one-party rule in Annapolis means for the state.
But first, voters in Baltimore City overwhelmingly choosing accountability for elected leaders. Fox 45's Mackenzie Frost is live with what this means for the city moving forward and how the mayor is reacting. Mackenzie?
Yeah, Mary, so the mayor says that he has been a supporter of term limits. We caught up with him earlier this afternoon asking him about the term limit question. That was question K that voters overwhelmingly supported and approved during the election day yesterday. That's the plan that would limit elected leaders to 2 terms in office. But we also are seeing another plan being fast-tracked through City Hall, right? It's backed by City Council President Nick Mosby, and he aims to change the pension requirements and qualifications for elected leaders, going from the current 12 years to 8 years. The council president says that it's directly tied to question K. Fox 45 also questioned some of the people who are supporting this plan, including Councilman Robert Stokes, about why he says changing the pension qualifications could be a good thing.
I work hard in the city for my constituents. I bring money to my constituents. Only job I have. I'm working hard. When I leave here, I want to have a pension. Everybody that works in this position should have access to a pension.
Earlier today, I sent Councilman Stokes a couple of questions trying to get some clarity on his comments, specifically asking what he's talking about when he says he brings money to his district and what bills he has introduced and gotten through that would directly impact his constituents in his district. But the councilman ignoring those questions. Marion Kai?
Well, Mackenzie, voters also approved question I, creating an independent advisory board for the Inspector General. When will this become a reality?
Well, it could be very soon. Question I creates that independent oversight advisory board for the Inspector General. When we spoke with the current Inspector General, Isabel Mercedes Cummings, she says that this was necessary to move Baltimore City in alignment with national best practices. The old advisory board was made up of politicians and appointed people who could potentially be involved in investigations. But now that board will be made up of citizens across Baltimore City. The application process is available online right now, and Cummings says she wants to see that board seated as early as January. I'll put a link to how you can apply in this story on our website as soon as we're off the air. Live in Baltimore, Mackenzie Frost, Fox 45 News.
Mackenzie, thank you. We want to know what you think. Should elected city leaders give themselves pensions after 8 years instead of the current 12? So far, 90% of those who responded voted to keep it at 12 years. Go to foxbaltimore.com to cast your vote.
In statewide races, Democrat Wes Moore, as we mentioned, defeated Dan Cox in the governor's race with about 2/3 of the vote. And Cox, by the way, called Moore this afternoon to concede. We saw those margins across most of the statewide races. Democrat Anthony Brown won the Attorney General's race with more than 60% of the vote.
And Democrat Brooke Learman will become the state's first female comptroller, holding off Republican Harford County Executive Barry Glassman.
Now, the wins by Democrats at the highest levels of state government means Maryland will soon be under one-party control. Fox 45's Maxine Stryker joins us live to explain what that means for you as a voter and a citizen. Maxine?
Well, Guy, Democrats, they swept the state, and one political expert I spoke with says that Republicans will now have to figure out how not to be rendered useless in Annapolis.
The tide is changing in Annapolis with the election of a new governor, Democrat Wes Moore.
Thank you, Maryland!
And other Democrats also won big last night. Brooke Learman was victorious in the race for comptroller.
We elect people, not parties. And we elected people last night who have big ideas about how we can be bold and how we can do better for Maryland families, communities.
And Anthony Brown will be the state's next attorney general, leaving Republicans outnumbered nearly 2-1.
But it is clear, y'all gave us a mandate. And that mandate is for a vision for a healthier and a wealthier Maryland.
I think when he said mandate, he meant Democrats won this state big. They held their legislative offices. There was no really big upsets at all. That basically there's the mandate that govern that basically says we are the party in charge.
Political analyst John Deedy says with Democrats sweeping the state, Annapolis is now under one-party rule.
There was a lot of things Democrats wanted to do over the last 8 years they couldn't do because Governor Hogan opposed those things. Now, I think a lot of those things are going to be on the fast track. You're going to see a Dagwood sandwich of legislation in this coming session.
But what will this mean for Republicans, seemingly fighting an uphill battle without Governor Hogan at the helm?
Republicans are going to have to pick the right spots for the right things. And, they can go after some of the fiscal issues. But when Democrats argue there's going to be a lot of money there, they're going to have to basically pick certain areas where they think they can get not as much a win, but to get the policy tweaked enough to improve it, to show, look, there may be a one party in Annapolis, but we are here to critique and make suggestions and make these ideas better when we know we can't stop them.
So excited for a new governor.
Senate President Bill Ferguson says just because there will be one-party rule doesn't mean the halls will always be harmonious.
Of course, there's a number of things that Democrats disagree with each other on. And so, the legislative process is built to take into account lots of different perspectives, and I'm confident that we're going to be able to do great work on behalf of Marylanders.
Well, last time the state was under one-party rule was 8 years ago under Governor Martin O'Malley. Reporting live in Baltimore, Maxine Stryker, Fox 45 News.
Thank you, Maxine. And that brings us to our second question of the day. Are you concerned about one-party rule in Maryland? Something we had in 2015. 94% of those who voted responded yes. Make your voice heard by going to foxbaltimore.com/vote.
Well, tonight, the NAACP is questioning whether the Baltimore police officer who shot and killed Tyree Moorhead, the creator of no-shoot zones in the city, used excessive force. Just yesterday, BPD released body-worn camera footage of the shooting that happened Sunday in West Baltimore. Alexa Ashwell has the video. We want to warn you, it is graphic.
The circle, again, showing the large butcher knife the individual had in his hand.
Here, a still image from an officer's body-worn camera. Investigators detailing it shows Tyree Moorhead on top of a woman and armed with a large knife. This happening seconds before the officer opened fire on Moorhead after arriving to the scene and ordering him to the ground. The commissioner releasing the footage. Fox 45 News choosing to freeze the video after the shots are fired, but not the audio.
Get down! Signal 13, get down! Get down!
The footage captures the officer firing a total of 14 rounds, some of those shots after Moorhead had rolled away from the woman but was still armed with the knife. The commissioner questioned on the use of force.
Are those gunshots justified, and please explain?
That will, it would be inappropriate for me to answer that before the conclusion of the investigation. That's why we have an investigation, and the investigation will produce a finding that would likely articulate the answer to that question.
The commissioner waiting on the outcome of the investigation, saying an officer's actions are based off of the immediacy and severity of a threat.
That officer had to assess that with the time that officer had. What I can say without compromising the integrity of the investigation, and I think it's clear to all of us, that the lady who was in danger's life was saved. We cannot and should not render a disposition on the investigation while it's under investigation.
The NAACP responding to the release of the video, posing several questions, including, and in part, is that use of force justified, or is this a case of excessive force? And what are the changes to training or policy that BPD will need to implement as a result of this incident? The commissioner today not publicly responding to those questions, reiterating what happened here at the corner of Fulton and Lafayette remains under investigation. Alexa Ashwell, Fox 45 News.
Well, the department has identified the officer as Officer Zachary Rutherford. Rutherford has been with BPD for just 8 months, but he has a total of 3 years law enforcement experience. The commissioner says both he and the other officer who is present have been placed on administrative duties pending the outcome of this investigation, and that is standard protocol.
The Department of Public Works is back in the hot seat as city officials continue to demand a weekly return to recycling. But Fox 45's Rebecca Pryor reports the agency is accused of dragging its feet. Rebecca?
Yeah, Kai, it's been almost a year since the city has had weekly recycling, and yet there's still no end in sight for those rolled back services. DPW Director Jason Mitchell is still claiming COVID-related staffing shortages is the reason for the bi-weekly collections. DPW admitting today that they have 700 vacancies across the entire department. But Councilman Yitzi Slifer argues the problem isn't a lack of employees, it's a lack of leadership.
It was a challenge hiring throughout the nation. We're no different.
There used to be an excellent bureau head of solid waste. He retired 14 months ago, and they have not replaced him. And so since there's no permanent head of solid waste, how could you expect for these issues to be resolved?
Now, another reason DPW's director says we can't get an updated timeline for when they'll resume weekly recycling is because they're still collecting data for their months-long route optimization report. However, he says that will be completed by December, and once it's released, they say that they will provide council with an updated timeline for when we'll get back to that weekly recycling. Reporting live in Baltimore, Rebecca Pryor, Fox 45 News.
Rebecca, thank you. A local county executive race could be undecided for days. The difficulties officials are running into in declaring a winner in Anne Arundel County.
Democrats will soon be in control of Maryland's most powerful positions. We're talking with Governor-elect Wes Moore about his vision for our state.
And some tropical impacts from Nicole could be heading our way later on this week. We're tracking that. And also a nice evening for heading out to dinner this evening as we fall back down into the 40s. But the chill could be replaced by rain, thunderstorms, and wind. I'll let you know when it could get here. My Weather Authority forecast.
Well, the GOP did not get the red wave it anticipated. National correspondent Atra El-Nashar has a look at candidate quality and the role it played in the elections.
Ballots are still being counted across the country, but within hours of polls closing, it was clear.
Definitely not a Republican wave, that's for darn sure.
Historical precedent and economic woes weren't enough to deliver sweeping gains for the GOP. One reason why Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell articulated back in August, predicting his party was less likely to flip the Senate than they were the House.
Candidate quality has a lot to do with the outcome.
Candidate quality, which McConnell appeared to have concerns about in the heat of primary season, saying this back in March.
You have to have electable nominees.
At the time, he said he was optimistic they would have that, naming 3 of the states where it turned out to not be quite true.
Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire.
In Georgia, it's neck and neck. Republican Herschel Walker and incumbent Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock are now preparing for a runoff. Walker's Senate campaign was rocked by scandal when the anti-abortion candidate was accused by multiple women of paying for their abortions. In one alleged case, pressuring her to get one.
As a heart surgeon.
In Pennsylvania, Trump-backed Mehmet Oz, who beat GOP establishment favorite David McCormick in the primary, lost to Democrat John Fetterman. Like Walker, Oz had no political experience.
Typically, the candidates that have less experience and are more sort of polarizing and ideologically extreme do worse in elections.
Ideology too extreme for voters may have also been at play in the New Hampshire Senate race, once considered a seat likely to flip to Republicans. Incumbent Democratic Senator Maggie Hassan beat Don Bolduc by a double-digit margin.
He even said that the future of reproductive rights belongs to men.
Hassan honing in on Bolduc's comments about abortion and his record of disputing the 2020 election. Now begins the party's post-election analysis to understand why some campaigns fell short and who may be to blame. On Capitol Hill, I'm Atra El-Nashar reporting.
Our Weather Authority team keeping an eye on a storm system barreling toward Florida. You are looking live at downtown Stuart, which is about an hour north of West Palm Beach. Nicole is expected to make a landfall there, bringing with it some heavy rain and high wind. Our region could feel the effects of Nicole later this week. Chief Meteorologist Jonathan Myers tracking Nicole's path. Jonathan?
Yeah, and Mary, you can see some of the wind that's kind of pushing those palms around, lots of rain, and we could get some impacts from Nicole around here. I wouldn't say it's going to be anything like Florida's going to get, but Friday into early Saturday, an inch or two of rain, not out of the question. Some gusty breezes, could be 20, maybe 30 miles an hour, could even locally have some 40-mile-an-hour gusts near the water. And even with the eventual track that the remnants are going to take off to our west, we're going to get some unstable air in here. There could be some, well, at least low-end severe weather risk. Now, a hurricane warning is in effect for the Palm Beaches all the way up toward about Orlando. As you see this thing barreling its way from east to west now across Grand Bahama as almost a hurricane. Now, most of the East Coast very quiet, but everybody really from Baltimore southbound, really all the way up to New England, too, waiting on some of the impacts from the eventual storm and its remnants. Right now, it's a tropical storm. That's Nicole. Heavy rain, high winds with it as it begins to make the push toward Florida. The final push probably overnight as it makes landfall. Could be a Category 1 hurricane when that happens. We're still jammed in with the dry air that we've seen for the past couple of days and that cooling trend. Highs only 55 to 60 today. There's a cold front that's out to the west that's going to pick this thing up and start arcing it off to the north. So it looks like we have a Category 1 hurricane making landfall in central Florida, south of Cape Canaveral tonight. And by the time we get into midday on Friday, this thing's a remnant, but it is pushing rain our way. The heaviest rain is going to be on the northwestern side. It appears closest to that cold front. That's where there could be several inches of rain. But even here, maybe about a half inch to an inch of rain in Baltimore. And then that marginal risk or level 1 of 5 risk of severe weather. The main threats would be damaging winds, maybe a spin-up tornado later Friday into Saturday early morning. So it is something that we're watching, but it's a low-end risk. Right now, 53 clear skies as the sun sets on the Toyota Asian Harbor Skycam. Look, on the other side of that cold front that's going to pick up that tropical moisture, temperatures in the teens, low teens and 20s. It's not going to get that cold around here, but we are going to have a big correction in temperatures behind those remnants and that cold front coming through. So overnight tonight, into early tomorrow morning. Couple patchy clouds. I think clouds will thicken tomorrow, gradually becoming cloudy through the day. I think these temperatures are a little underdone. I think we'll be well into the 60s if we can get enough of that filtered sunshine. Then Friday, there's the rain coming in on and off, heavy throughout the day. Could even see a thunderstorm in the afternoon and the evening. So that's something to watch there as Nicole's remnants make the push through Maryland. 42, mostly clear for tonight. 68 becoming cloudy for tomorrow. Get the umbrellas out Friday into early Saturday. Breezy, showery on Saturday. Then the bottom falls out. Could see a spot shower on Sunday. 50 and highs only in the 40s early next week.
Jonathan, thank you. He'll make history as Maryland's first black governor. Fox 45 News is talking one-on-one with Wes Moore.
The fallout from the midterm elections has some already speculating about the presidential race in 2024. I'm Kayla Gaskins in Washington.
While Republicans nationally didn't have the big wins they were hoping for, some did build momentum ahead of the presidential campaign cycle. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins has the details.
Voters handing some decisive victories on Tuesday.
Freedom is here to stay.
Perhaps the biggest winner, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, beating Democrat Charlie Crist by 20 percentage points.
We not only won election, we have rewritten the political map.
Republican Marco Rubio holding on to his Florida Senate seat easily, beating Democrat Val Demings.
And they will reward leaders that pay attention to them.
Prominent Republicans Tim Scott from South Carolina and Governor Greg Abbott in Texas sailing to victory in their races.
These easy victories and new questions about whether former President Donald Trump is partially to blame for Republicans' lackluster performance on Election Day, spurring speculation about those running in 2024.
I think the big message from this election is that voters want their elected leaders to get things done.
Virginia Governor Republican Glenn Youngkin, who won a decisive victory in blue-leaning Virginia last year, is seen as a possible 2024 option for Republicans.
Governors who have been delivering were rewarded with a lot of support and a lot of bipartisan support.
DeSantis increasingly looking like a presidential contender himself.
We made promises to the people of Florida, and we have delivered on those promises.
And possible rival to Trump, who is expected to announce his own bid for 2024 next week. A number of Trump's own cabinet officials expected to challenge him, including Vice President Mike Pence, UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. A potentially crowded field as the GOP asks whether it's time to re-embrace the former president or move on. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins.
It could be days before we learn who won the Anne Arundel County executive race. Why it's taking so long?
Breaking news to report right now. The mayor's office confirms it will reveal the results and plans following the months-long meetings of the Squeegee Collaborative. Tomorrow afternoon, that is expected at 1:30. It was previously confirmed to Fox 45 News that a Squeegee code of conduct would be self-policed and could be part of that plan, along with guaranteed income for those who stop squeegeeing in designated squeegee zones for those who continue. Last week, the mayor refused to provide details on how any of this would be put into place, and that's what we hope to find out details tomorrow. Again, it's at 1:30. Fox 45 will have complete coverage.
And it's because you believed that I stand here humbled and ready to become the 63rd governor of the state of Maryland.
An historic night in Maryland. Wes Moore winning the race for governor, becoming the first black governor in our state.
And that wasn't the only first. Democrats swept the three major races in Annapolis, each historic in its own right. Anthony Brown became the first African-American to win the race for Attorney General, and Brooke Learman will be the first woman to serve as state comptroller.
Wes Moore won the governor's race by a commanding margin. All the votes have not yet been counted, but he's currently over 20 points ahead of Republican Dan Cox. Cox has conceded.
Fox 45's Mackenzie Frost spoke with Moore today about what's next for his administration.
She joins us live now. Mackenzie?
Marian Kai spoke with Wes Moore right after he got off the phone with Delegate Cox, who did call and concede earlier this afternoon. Moore tells me he's ready to get to work, and one of his top priorities once he does take office will be tackling crime. Governor-elect Wes Moore not wasting time talking with reporters about his details for his administration. First, taking the concession call from Delegate Dan Cox.
He said coming into the election that he wasn't sure if he was going to concede. So I'm really grateful that that Delegate Cox decided to make the concession, and I'm excited to move forward now.
Now looking to reach out to everyone in Maryland, letting them know he says he's ready to start building his plans.
We have to be able to build an economy that grows. We have to be able to have an economy that is participatory, that people have a chance to participate in that economy. And that does include people who I might not have been their choice for governor, but I hope to be able to earn their support over these next 8 years.
8 years. Looking already to a second term?
I'm excited because I know this is Maryland's decade. This is going to be our time. It's going to be our time to build. It's going to be our time to grow. It's going to be our time to compete. Maryland will compete, and Maryland will win. And I don't think there's a difference between saying we're going to be more competitive and be more equitable as if we have to choose. It's not a choice. We are going to do both.
The first thing that you talked about when you were looking at the administration was crime and public safety.
Yes.
And obviously in Baltimore, that is something that weighs heavily on the minds of voters. How do you plan to move that forward? And what do you think are some of the first priorities in that realm of public safety that you think you can get done?
If you don't get public safety right, nothing else is going to work. Because if people don't feel safe, they're not going to stay and they're not going to come. So it is the number one priority that we've got to drill in and we've got to focus on. We've got to make sure we are getting and keeping violent offenders off of our streets.
One of the priorities for the current administration in Annapolis was the violent firearms offender bill. It didn't get through the General Assembly, targeting those repeat violent offenders. Is that something that you would look at again coming up for this next session?
It is something we are going to look at, because we've got to prioritize not just getting these firearms and illegal guns off of our streets. It's also about going after the people who continue to bring them into communities.
Hours after Moore became the first black governor in Maryland, Governor Larry Hogan called to congratulate, along with President Joe Biden. Can you explain a little bit about that conversation that you had with President Biden, and then do you have your transition team set and ready to go?
Yeah, so I was thankful that the president called last night to congratulate me, and he said what he said actually the night before when he was here in Maryland. What he said, I'm excited about Maryland. I'm excited about what you guys are doing. And I think it's really humbling to know that the president of the United States also understands that this is going to be Maryland's decade, and that starts now. And so you all will see that in short order, we are going to be announcing what the transition and transformation team is going to look like for the Moore-Miller administration.
Now, tomorrow, Governor Larry Hogan and Wes Moore will be meeting in Annapolis, and then they will take some questions, so we could learn a little bit more about what that transition will look like. Live in Baltimore, Mackenzie Frost, Fox 45 News.
Thank you, Mackenzie. Brooke Learman also made history last night. She becomes the first woman to serve as state comptroller. Learman has represented Baltimore's 46th district in the House of Delegates since 2015. She says she hopes her service inspires other women to fight for positions in government. She joined us earlier this afternoon on Fox 45 News at 4 to discuss her victory.
I think it shows that the people of Maryland, that Marylanders were ready to elect bold, new, innovative leaders. And, we traveled around the state. I certainly have, for the past 2 years, been traveling around the state talking to Marylanders about the importance of the Comptroller's office and about how this office and the resources of this office can really lift up Maryland families, businesses, and communities and build more financial resilience.
Learman defeated Republican Barry Glassman. She will succeed four-term Comptroller Peter Franchot, who lost his bid for governor in the July primary.
In key local races, Democratic county executives were looking to fend off Republican challengers last night. In Baltimore County, Democratic incumbent Johnny Olszewski came out on top over former state delegate Pat McDonough. In Howard County, Democrat Calvin Ball claimed victory against former county executive Alan Kittleman. But in Anne Arundel County, voters are still waiting to learn who will be county executive for the next 4 years. Republican Jessica Hare is currently leading incumbent Democrat County Executive Stuart Pittman by just under 11,000 votes. Amy Simpson joins us live now with the latest on the battle for that seat. Amy?
Yeah, Mary, you may remember we saw this happen in the primary races in July, where several races across the state of Maryland all hinged on those mail-in ballots.
A day after Election Day, and the race for Anne Arundel County Executive is still waiting for a winner. So many more. As of this morning, the Anne Arundel County Board of Elections said more than 45,000 mail-in ballots had been returned to be counted, and a high volume of timely ballots were expected to arrive today. Incumbent County Executive Stuart Pittman, hoping to keep the job for another 4 years, says he's not surprised.
It's exactly what we expected would happen, that we would be down on Election Day when these results came out, and that we would have to wait until they counted mail-in votes.
The Board of Elections will begin its canvass of mail-in ballots at 10 a.m. tomorrow, and says its team of 50 bipartisan counting teams will get through 15,000 ballots a day. Counting will not take place on Friday because of Veterans Day, meaning it won't be until next week before a winner may be declared. Pittman's camp says more than 27,000 of those mail-in ballots are from Democratic voters, while less than 10,000 mail-in ballots were returned by Republicans.
We feel good about those mail-in ballots. You know, we know the party breakdown.
Republican candidate Jessica Hare's campaign did not respond to an interview request today, but yesterday the candidate herself was optimistic.
People are coming out of the polls giving me thumbs up, high five, saying we're so excited for change. We feel good the whole time. Our message has consistently been resonating.
Hare indicated the race would not be over until all results were in.
We're just going to wait for every vote to be counted, and we're excited to see it.
As Pittman also waits for the finish line.
We asked our people to vote early, vote by mail, get your mail-in ballots in, and they did, and that's why we're behind now. But that's okay, because what really matters is who's on top at the very end.
So with more than 45,000 mail-in ballots already returned to the Anne Arundel County Board of Elections and the ability to count 15,000 a day, that's already at least 3 days of ballot counting that needs to happen over the next week or so. And the Board of Elections tells me that it expects to give an update tomorrow on the number of mail-in ballots it received today to add to that 45,000 total. Reporting live tonight, Amy Simpson, Fox 45 News.
Thank you, Amy. While it was a banner night for Maryland Democrats at the top of the ticket, one of Maryland's U.S. congressmen is in a fight for his seat. With 72% of precincts reporting, Republican delegate Neil Parrott has a slim lead over incumbent Representative David Trone. Now, it is important to note the New York Times reports many of those ballots left to count are from Montgomery County, which traditionally is a Democratic stronghold.
Maryland voters overwhelmingly approved the use of recreational marijuana. Starting next July, anyone 21 and up will be allowed to carry up to 1.5 ounces of pot and grow up to 2 plants out of public view. People with previous marijuana convictions will also be able to file a petition for expungement. Maryland officially joins 19 states and 3 territories that have legalized adult recreational use. Now, legalization was on the ballot in several other states last night. According to the AP, a ballot initiative legalizing recreational use also passed in Missouri. Meanwhile, voters in North Dakota and Arkansas rejected legalization.
The Baltimore Police Department will once again be controlled by the local government. Last night, city voters approved Question H. That ballot measure ends a Civil War-era policy, putting the city police department under the supervision of the state of Maryland. Currently, the city controls the department's budget, and the mayor appoints the police commissioner. But the city government is limited in its ability to make broader policy changes under the old system.
City leaders and Members of the community joined Mayor Brandon Scott this afternoon in Cherry Hill for the grand opening of the Middle Branch Fitness and Wellness Center. The multi-million-dollar recreational center has been in the works for more than 10 years. It features multiple pools, community spaces, basketball courts, and more. Speakers at the event today say city projects like these will give kids a place to grow in a healthy way and improve the community.
This is an incredible moment, a historic moment. It is proof that when the community organizes, when the community comes together and say, this is what we demand and this is what we deserve, we can get it done.
The new Wellness Center costs $23 million to build and is the largest city-owned recreational facility in Baltimore.
A former Baltimore County Schools educator is echoing the message of others to get violence under control in schools. A few years ago, this educator tried to break up fights, but was hurt in that process, being pulled to the ground by a student who came from behind. Well, after the fight, the educator was treated for back injuries and head injuries, but as the physical wounds healed, mental ones started to emerge. As time went on, the educator says they started feeling panic, stress, and all of that began to creep into everyday life.
I think people take for granted how violence in schools can impact individuals. Kids get hurt too, adults get hurt. It's not something to be taken lightly.
Tonight at 10 o'clock, Project Baltimore speaks with a therapist about school violence, why the therapist says this issue has gotten worse. An historic vote in Florida, meeting the first member of Gen Z to win a congressional race. And a Maryland couple on their way to vote encounters an Election Day tragedy.
And if you're going to be doing some grilling tonight and getting out there, maybe with the flashlight in the dark, it looks like the steaks are going to come out just fine with those temperatures. Nice and cool, and the 50s falling back down into the 40s. I'll let you know when we're going to be seeing some effects from some tropical weather potentially around here. It's up in my Weather Authority forecast.
all voters can do right now is wait. The ballots are still being counted, and that will decide the balance of power in Washington. All eyes are on the state of Georgia, where incumbent Democrat Raphael Warnock and Republican challenger Herschel Walker are headed for a runoff election. A state law requires a candidate to win 50% of the vote to win the state. Neither candidate met that mark. The runoff will be held December 6th. Well, a major win for Democrats came in Pennsylvania, with John Fetterman beating Republican Mehmet Oz. Both Democrats and Republicans highlighted the battle in Pennsylvania as one of the most important in the country. Democrats are still hoping for wins in Nevada and Arizona to maintain their slim majority in the state. Well, for the first time, a member of Gen Z will be in Congress. 25-year-old Florida Democrat Maxwell Frost won Florida's 10th congressional district. That district includes Orlando and leans heavily Democratic. Frost will replace Democrat Val Demings, who failed in her bid to beat Marco Rubio for a Florida Senate seat. All right. Meteorologist Jonathan Myers here with our weather which is nice, a little crisp out a little bit
58.
today, but still nice out overall.
Sun.
For November?
Yeah, it feels
This
good.
is
I mean, it could be snowing.
Easily, right?
It's not typical, but we could see some tropical weather, too, that we've got coming up in the scopes. Let's go ahead and take a look at what we have with the impacts of Nicole. Yes, you may have heard about Nicole. It's going to be making landfall as a Category 1 hurricane likely tonight into early tomorrow on the central Florida coastline, right around and just north of the Palm Beaches. But we could see some impacts once it makes its way well over land for several days, for at least a couple of days. We could be seeing Friday into early Saturday, maybe an inch or two of rain, some gusty breezes. It could maybe even be a risk of severe weather with this. Hurricane watches are all lined up. No, not here in Baltimore. Got to get down into South Carolina for the tropical storm watches and warnings. And then, of course, there is Nicole making the push tonight into tomorrow toward Florida, and that's where the hurricane warnings are. Nice weather with fair weather, high pressure, our main weather maker, at least through tonight into early tomorrow. Then the clouds from this combined with this way out west, that's a cold front, all coming together and pushing up the coast. So things do get cloudier tomorrow, and then the rain. Take a look. Once this makes landfall tonight as Category 1, it weakens readily and steadily and is a remnant low by Friday noontime, and then eventually the rain moves here through the day on Friday and on into early Saturday. Heaviest rain in the yellow and orange. That could be easily 2-3 inches. Here in Baltimore, though, probably up to about 1.5 inches of rain, I'm thinking. And we're running about 1.25 inches below average for the fall. So we could use some rain, and I think we'll be okay with not really seeing much in the way of flooding. But there is that marginal or level 1 risk of severe weather out of this. Main threat would be damaging winds. There could even be a spin-up tornado. It's an outside chance, but it is something we will watch. Toyota East Shooter Harbor Skycam. Right now it's clear skies. That's from when the sun was still up, 53 degrees. And some warmth out to our west. Actually, temperatures will warm for us tomorrow, not to 81 like they're seeing in St. Louis, but we'll be into the 60s and probably near 70 and muggy on Friday with the showers and maybe a storm as that tropical moisture moves through. Then behind it, look at those teens and 20s up into the Intermountain West. Won't get that cold here, but it is going to chill down significantly. Now, take a look. Overnight tonight into early tomorrow morning, some extra clouds maybe towards sunrise. Temperatures falling down to about 40 to 45. Okay day tomorrow, although kind of milky sunshine should give way to fading and thickening clouds. And you'll see the temperatures, at least on this computer model. One camp says it may only stay in the 50s. I think the clouds will be thin enough that we do get well into the 60s. And then here we go on Friday. This is the day that we see the potential moisture coming through with Nicole. 42 degrees, mostly clear for tonight. Tomorrow, 68 as it becomes cloudy. Friday, a heavy rain day potentially into Friday night, early Saturday. Breezy, blustery, showery on Saturday, 30% chance there. Maybe a shower on Sunday, but look at those temperatures. Highs only in the 40s to near 50, end of the weekend, early next week.
Jonathan, thank you. Tragedy in Maryland yesterday. A couple walking to their neighbor's polling place, hit and killed by a car. Jay Korf from our Sinclair sister station in Washington, D.C., has the sad details.
I spoke with a poll worker who personally knows this couple. She also witnessed the crash and tried to save their lives. Nicole Ukedi-Yeti says while setting up outside Fields Road Elementary School in Gaithersburg, a polling site for Tuesday's election, she watched in horror as a car hit two of her neighbors as they tried crossing the street in the crosswalk.
And I was like, oh my God, I started screaming and crying.
A family member confirms to 7 News on Your Side that Anna and Miguel Ortiz, married for 46 years, lost their lives while heading from their nearby home to the school to vote.
They've been around a while and they're well known in the neighborhood, and it's very sad this has happened.
The lady was just flying up.
Yuketi Yeti says that she ran to one of the victims and tried to perform CPR, but it was too late. She says that she turned to the driver and insisted that he stay until police arrive.
And I said, you cannot go. You have to stop there. You have to stop. So he opened the door.
Neighbors say speeding cars have plagued this community for far too long.
This has been an issue. I mean, it's been an issue for a while, people speeding on this road.
Now, police are looking at speed as a possible factor in this double fatal collision, but they're also looking into the possibility that alcohol played a role. An Ortiz family spokesperson says 70-year-old Anna and 65-year-old Miguel were hardworking and happily married for decades. This neighborhood their home for 35 years. They leave behind 4 children and 9 grandchildren. I'm Jay Korf for 7 News.
Well, coming up at 6 o'clock on Fox 45, Baltimore voters make several decisions on key ballot questions. What Mayor Brandon Scott is saying about the changes. Houston opposing quarterbacks. We have a problem after a memorable performance Monday night against the Saints. One Ravens linebacker has earned weekly honors.
Justin Houston has been at it for a long time. Drafted by the Chiefs in 2011, a first-team All-Pro in 2014, 4-time Pro Bowler from 2012 to 2015. He's tied for the most safeties, not only in a single season, but all time. Now 33 years old, and after registering 2.5 sacks and an interception, that on Monday night against the Saints, Houston has been named AFC Defensive Player of the Week. The thought might have been that his best years were behind him. Seemed Houston thought so too, because he says he was getting ready to retire in the offseason, but he's proving week in and week out that he's still got it. The Orioles made a few roster moves this afternoon as Major League Baseball's offseason heats up. The big one, the team declined Jordan Lyles' $11 million option for 2023, meaning the 32-year-old pitcher will become a free agent. However, that doesn't necessarily mean he won't be back in Baltimore next season. The O's also claimed outfielder Daz Cameron off waivers. They now have 34 players on that 40-man roster. The next wave of Terps have put pen to paper, making their decisions to play for Kevin Willard official. And one of the signees hails from right here in Baltimore. St. Francis Academy's Jonathan Lamoth is headed to College Park. He's the #3 player in the entire state. Willard signed 2 other DMV guys as well, bringing in Deshaun Harris-Smith and Jamie Kaiser. Maryland is back in action tomorrow night against Western Carolina. Coming up tonight, we'll take a look at Brenda Freese's recruiting class as the Terps women's basketball team gets set for their showdown with SC when Sports Unlimited returns.
All right, and a quick in-depth look at your weekend forecast, and at least the very beginning of it dominated by the moisture from Nicole. There's a cold front moving in from the west. That's what you see lit up with the yellows out toward Charleston and West Virginia, west of Pittsburgh. That's on Friday. We're going to see a little band of rain come through, the initial push of moisture from the remnants of Nicole. Maybe some more Friday night. Should be gone, I think, potentially by Saturday when you wake up, but there's still going to be some clouds and a stray shower as the actual front comes through on Saturday and winds do pick up. Then Sunday, little coastal system glances to our south and east with the colder air in place. It's going to be a chilly and maybe sprinkly day with highs only 50 there, otherwise near 70 heading into the weekend and could be potentially wet.
Jonathan, thank you. Coming up on Fox 45 News at 6 o'clock, the Squeegee Collaborative's plan will be released tomorrow. What the city can expect to hear from the mayor. And a first look at low-end housing available for World Cup fans in Qatar. Why FIFA says these options should still be enticing for visitors.
Breaking news on Baltimore Squeegee Collaborative, when the formal plan will be announced and what could be included. A night of firsts in Maryland as election results keep rolling in. Fox 45 News hears from some of the new faces of Maryland politics and looks at how Baltimore residents voted for new accountability measures in the city. And a renewed push for weekly recycling pickup in the city. Why DPW leaders and city council members disagree on how the department is falling short.
Live from WBFF in Baltimore, this is Fox 45 News at 6.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mary Bubala. We're following some breaking news tonight as the mayor's office confirms the Squeegee Collaborative's plan will be released tomorrow afternoon after months of meetings. It is expected at 1:30, the announcement. It was previously confirmed to Fox 45 News that a self-police Squeegee code of conduct could be part of the plan. Now, that plan could also include guaranteed income for those who stop squeegeeing and designated zones for those who continue. Last week, the mayor refused to provide details on how any of this would be put into place, and that's what we expect to find out tomorrow.
We had one mission, and Maryland, you showed tonight that if we stand divided, we cannot win. But if we stand united, we cannot lose.
Some election night history in Maryland. Democrat Wes Moore becomes Maryland's first black governor and only the third black governor in American history. The governor's race, one of several decided so far, as we continue to track many others. Just this afternoon, Republican Dan Cox called Moore to concede. He also issued a statement thanking former President Donald Trump for his support. And here's a look at some of the other big statewide races on what was an historic night in Maryland. Anthony Brown will be the first black man to serve as Maryland's Attorney General, defeating Republican Michael Peruka. Brooke Learman also makes history in the Comptroller race, defeating Barry Glassman to become the first woman to win a statewide election. She joined Fox 45 News at 4 to share her message to Marylanders.
The people of Maryland, that Marylanders were ready to elect bold, new, innovative leaders. And, you know, we traveled around the state. I certainly have, for the past 2 years, been traveling around the state talking to Marylanders about the importance of the Comptroller's office and about how this office and the resources of this office can really lift up Maryland families, businesses, and communities.
Voters in Baltimore City made their voices clear on several key ballot measures, choosing independence and accountability from elected leaders. Fox 45's Mackenzie Frost takes us through the decisions and reaction from Mayor Scott.
From a truly independent watchdog to implementing term limits for some elected leaders, Baltimore City voters made their voices very clear on Election Day. And now it appears as if some city council members are poised to make it easier for them to earn a pension.
Good morning, good morning.
Baltimore City voters turning out to the polls, casting their ballots for independence.
I is for Independent Advisory Board.
Question I, creating a truly independent oversight board of the city's Inspector General, the watchdog, rooting out waste, fraud, and corruption in the halls of city government.
If you want a strong Inspector General, if you want a strong watchdog for the city, they have to be independent.
Instead of politicians overseeing the IG, the board will be made up of people from across Baltimore, passing with 86% of the vote, and ballots are still being counted.
This is a really exciting time in Baltimore City for independence.
David Williams, taxpayer protection advocate, says all eyes are on Baltimore, and this time it's a good thing.
Right now, Baltimore City is the envy of the country.
In the final days leading up to the election, Council President Nick Mosby changing the rules of the game, introducing a bill changing the city's pension requirements, making elected leaders eligible for a payout after 8 years in office instead of 12. While the city's first responders must work 25 years to become eligible for a pension. The council president tying the bill to question K, implementing term limits for the leaders.
As council members, as elected officials, if the citizens of Baltimore vote that they don't want you to be in office for 16 or 20 or 24 years, I think it is prudent of us to be in alignment with where the motivation of the city is.
Voters overwhelmingly telling Baltimore City electeds they don't want them serving more than 2 terms in the same office. Question K, passing with 72% of the vote. And because the council fast-tracked their pension plan in about 3 weeks, the entire council now poised to pass the bill.
This is the most self-serving piece of legislation that I have seen.
Fox 45 News asking some of the members who supported the bill just this week, why?
I work hard in the city for my constituents.
Councilman Robert Stokes not shy about his desire to draw a pension.
I bring money to my constituents. Only job I have.
Stokes' claim remains in question. Fox 45 News finding a slew of bills and resolutions with Stokes' name attached, mostly as a co-sponsor, and the majority of the bills, oversight hearings. Stokes is the same councilman who called an investigative hearing into ghost student and grade-changing news uncovered by Fox 45's Project Baltimore only not to ask city schools about it.
Why not you ask the hard questions?
Because I'm setting the tone. My tone is to be able to talk about school performance.
Stokes also refusing to attend Fox 45's town hall held in his district, talking about crime, which was one of the most dangerous council districts in all of Baltimore. And now, if approved by the council, he will earn a pension. Right now, Stokes earns nearly $74,000 a year. We sent him a couple of questions via email Wednesday, asking, what bills have you sponsored and gotten adopted that impact your constituents directly? What money are you referring to when you say you, quote, bring money to your constituents? The councilman ignoring the questions, refusing to provide more details. Meanwhile, Mayor Brandon Scott issuing a lengthy statement about Election Day, but he doesn't mention Question K and term limits set to become reality. Fox 45 News, though, catching up with the mayor in South Baltimore.
Listen, I supported term limits and voted term limits twice. So for me, we know that the voters have spoken. I wish we would have made that decision to have term limits 4 years ago and before that, when I voted on it before that, and now we just have to make sure that all the other regulations fall in line with it.
Mayor Brandon Scott says he hasn't had time to look at the pension plan, so it's unclear if he will sign it. It's unclear when that pension plan will be up for a third reader vote inside City Hall, but it's clear Baltimore City voters want to send a message to their elected leaders, saying that they want accountability, transparency, and independence from their elected leaders. In Baltimore, Mackenzie Frost, Fox 45 News.
Big Democratic victories in a pair of county executive races in Baltimore County. Incumbent Johnny Olszewski held on to defeat Republican Pat McDonough, receiving close to 60% of the vote. A similar margin in Howard County as Calvin Ball took 57% of the vote against Alan Kittleman in a rematch. A different story in Anne Arundel County. Republican Jessica Hare leads incumbent Democrat Stuart Pittman by about 11,000 votes, but that is not a decisive margin at this time. Now, Anne Arundel County isn't opening mail-in ballots until tomorrow. More than 45,000 ballots have been received. Most of the mail-in ballots belong to Democrats, and officials say it's enough to change the outcome if party lines are held. There are 25,000 ballots. It could be days before the winner is known. Mary?
Kai, thank you. Well, DPW on the hot seat at City Hall as city officials demand a return to weekly recycling. Fox 45's Rebecca Pryor reports.
Yeah, it's been almost a year since the city has had weekly recycling, and while DPW is blaming a lack of employees, city officials that I spoke with say the real problem is a lack of leadership.
How close we are to being sufficiently staffed to meet the needs of the department.
It's a timeline question being asked time.
We deserve core city services.
And time again.
How many physical people are we short today?
City officials pressing the Department of Public Works for a return to weekly recycling. But since cutting back services in January, claiming COVID-fueled staffing shortages, DPW still has no concrete plans put in place.
It's a challenge hiring throughout the nation. We're no different.
DPW Director Jason Mitchell saying a timeline can't be determined until the department finishes a months-long route optimization data report.
We'll definitely have that in the report next month.
But you can't even give an estimate. You said that you're planning for it.
Yes, so the report it provides that all that information.
Meanwhile, DPW admitting today they're down 700 employees, many of them CDL drivers. Online job postings suggest the city is offering between $40 to $50K for the position. This compared to a quick search on salary.com showing that's on the low end, with the average salary for CDL drivers in Baltimore close to $60K. When questioned about the disparity, Director Mitchell, who makes $245,000 a year, says DPW's current pay scale is a work in progress.
Yeah, we are. We're working with HR on potentially salary survey so we can assess our pay compared to the industry, as well as bonuses is something that we're looking at.
What we're seeing is that the money is going to people in the executive and higher level positions are making way more than they need to be making. And the workers who are actually physically doing the work are being underpaid.
Regardless, Councilman Yitzi Slifer says the root of the problem isn't a lack of staff. He believes it's a lack of leadership.
There needs to be somebody who's thinking long-term, who's responsible to solve these issues. And they have not felt a sense of urgency to fill that position.
Pointing to one position in particular, for over a year now, DPW has failed to hire a head of solid waste, to which Yitzi says without someone in charge of that department, challenges will likely continue.
This is long past the level of unacceptable. This is complete incompetence.
And to help combat the reduction to recycling collection, DPW has recently just opened up a new drop-off location where you can take your extra recycling. For more information, you can go to their website. That's publicworks.baltimore.gov. Reporting in Baltimore, Rebecca Pryor, Fox 45 News.
Well, coming up, President Biden takes to the podium for the first time since last night's results. Why he says Democrats performed better than expected despite the congressional balance of power still in the balance. Tropical storm Nicole approaches the Florida coast. How locals are preparing for the storm's arrival.
And breaking now, Nicole is a Category 1 hurricane heading towards the central Florida coastline. And if it hits as a Category 1 tonight, is forecast the first time in 37 years that we have a November hurricane hitting the United States. And we could have impacts around here. I'll let you know what we'll see and when. My Weather Authority forecast.
Fox 45 News, winner of 17 2022 Regional Emmy Awards, more than all other Baltimore news stations combined.
President Biden addresses last night's election results, calling them a strong result for Democrats after predictions of a red wave and Republican control of both the House and Senate. While that is still possible, the president says whatever happens, he'll reach across the aisle with the new Congress.
Regardless of what the final tally in these elections show, and there's still some counting going on, I'm prepared to work with my Republican colleagues. The American people have made clear, I think, that they expect Republicans to be prepared to work with me as well.
One of the most watched Senate races won't be decided this month. The Georgia Senate election between Democratic incumbent Raphael Warnock and Republican challenger Herschel Walker is heading to a runoff since neither person reached 50% of the vote. The Georgia runoff election is set for December 6th. Arizona and Nevada's Senate races are also too close to call.
Well, let's take a live look at Stuart, Florida, near West Palm Beach, as we continue to follow the path of Hurricane Nicole, just declared a hurricane moments ago. Mike Magnoli from our Sinclair sister station in West Palm Beach has an update on the coastline.
So the east coast of Florida already starting to see the effects of Storm Nicole. Give you a look at the surf out there. This is the Juno Beach Pier. Now, Juno Beach is a small community in northern Palm Beach County. Only about 3,000 people live here, and a lot of them are seasonal. Just talking to the mayor a little while ago, she's not exactly sure how many people are already down here for the winter. But the big concern right now is what you're seeing in these pictures, storm surge. And back in the 80s, the Juno Beach Pier was taken out by a November storm. Now, down here in Florida, we are very close to the end of the season, the finish line nearly there, and we're getting Storm Nicole. So we expect conditions here to deteriorate over the next couple of hours. The storm surge only going to get worse. Beach erosion in communities like this all over Palm Beach County, and then north of here into Martin County and what we call the Treasure Coast in Florida. Beach erosion there, also a big concern during this event. A couple of zones on the barrier island, the homes that are closest to the ocean, are under evacuation. For the most part, it's voluntary at this point, but there have been some shelters opening in the area, and we are going to continue to monitor this, and we'll bring you updates. I'm Mike Magnoli reporting.
All right, Jonathan, Nicole, now a hurricane. Poor Florida, my goodness.
Man, just unbelievable. Lisa, Martin, and now Nicole, all November hurricanes. And this could be the first one to hit the United States, first November hurricane in 37 years.
Wow.
So, yeah, pretty notable. And the last one, I believe it was Kate, which was back in 1985, and that hit right around somewhere in here, right around Mexico Beach, Florida, as a 100-mile-an-hour Category 1. So this one not too far behind, as winds are at 75 miles an hour, and as our reporter there was mentioning, right around Martin County, all the way down to the Palm Beaches, up the Treasure Coast. That is where this storm is headed, and then eventually, as it crosses over this red area that's covered in all kinds of storm surge warnings and tropical storm warnings, hurricane warnings, eventually it is going to make a bit of a turn up the coast, and it looks like we are going to see maybe not a hurricane or not even a tropical storm, but remnant moisture that's going to push up toward Baltimore. And there's even some risk of severe weather as we remain on the eastern side of the circulation, which is typically where you get kind of the spin-up tornadoes and the thunderstorms. Now, mind you, this storm is going to be highly weakened by the time it gets here. It's going to travel over a lot of land, so the chance of that are low, but it's not zero. Nice right now, high pressure, fair weather. That is our fair weather friend. That is our weather maker. It's been here the past couple of days and giving us that nice autumnal air, the heavy rain, high winds with, it still had the tropical storm marker here. It's now a hurricane, Hurricane Nicole, moving directly towards the Florida coastline. The dry weather going to be kind of munched away by a cold front that's out to the west. It's eventually going to kind of get a grip on this storm and pull it achingly northbound, and then eventually speed this thing up and get all that moisture up into the northeastern U.S. That cold front now is way out there in the plains as well as the Rockies. Actually put down several feet of snow in California and some drought-quenching rain. Still a lot more rain needed out that way, but anything that we get helps. That will start putting rain down in places like Pittsburgh, Charleston, Columbus, Ohio, Friday into Saturday, with maybe 3 to 4 inches of rain combined with that remnant moisture from Nicole. Around here, we're going to be a little farther east, so I think it's going to be about a ½ to 1.5 inches of rain that we see. And we're running about 1.25 inches or so below average on the fall. So we could use a little bit of rain, too, and I think we can handle it. We do have a marginal risk of flash flooding, so it's a pretty low risk. And we also have a low risk, a 1 out of 5 marginal risk of severe weather. You can see the yellow, that's a 2 out of 5, with the slight risk, the better chance of severe weather that's down in the Carolinas, where the storm's still going to be a little bit stronger. That marginal risk, that means that isolated severe storm chance, nothing like enhanced, moderate, or high, but it's about as low as you can get, but still you could have some of the heavy rain, the winds. I don't think we're going to see hail, so a warm storm here, but we could have, again, that low spin-up tornado risk as well. That would be later Friday into Friday night. So 53 degrees, mile 1 task cam right now. Clear skies, winds out of the northeast at 3, still feeling nice and crisp. But that cooler air on the way out, more unstable air that's down to the south and west. Look at those temperatures, 70s to near 80 on the way in. We are going to moderate into the 60s to near 70. And then look at Billings, Montana, all the way up to Bismarck, 10 to 27 degrees. That's it behind that cold front. So there's some serious cold air behind that. And some of that colder air is going to get here, but not yet. Take a look. We've got just a couple of patchy clouds overnight, settling into the 40s. I think for tomorrow, some high clouds gradually thickening through the day, especially later in the day. And there's that rain from Nicole and that cold front paired up, moving toward us as we work into Friday, on and off pretty much all through the day. There's the heaviest stuff that's out to the west. And again, some of the thunderstorm activity approaching in the afternoon and the evening for Friday night. 42, mostly clear skies tonight. Still a good-looking day tomorrow, but cloudier, a high 65 to 70. I'm going to let you know what Nicole's going to do for us into the early weekend, and then what comes beyond it. That's all my exclusive 10-day forecast.
Weather Window, presented by the National Weather Desk.
A fantastic time-lapse showing the clouds moving over Oregon's coastal range. The ensuing sunset turned the sky a bright orange. This Chinese pistache tree is showing its fall colors in El Paso. Can't say the same for the neighboring palm tree. And Mother Nature put on a show in the Las Vegas area. Viewers contributed many shots of rainbows decorating the sky.
Want to see your weather photos and videos on TV? Click Chime In on this station's website to share.
From Baltimore to the NBA, a former mayor's new role with one of the world's biggest sports leagues. Here's a look at today's top trending stories. Number one, city officials are cutting the ribbon on a $23 million rec center in Cherry Hill. The new Middle Branch Fitness and Wellness Center includes 3 pools, a basketball court, and an indoor track. Mayor Scott was on hand to celebrate the event today, saying today's ribbon cutting is about building spaces the community deserves. Nice shot. Number two, former Baltimore Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake has been named executive director for the NBA Players Association Foundation. The organization helps highlight the work players do in their communities. Rawlings Blake says she looks forward to working with NBA players and celebrate them as role models. Number 3, we are getting our first look at some of the fan accommodations for this month's World Cup in Qatar. The village is made up of refurbished shipping containers, which can fit up to 2 people. Officials are marketing it as a low-end option, cheaper than hotels. The 6,000-unit village will have a bus and metro line to downtown stadium areas. And we're following some breaking news. Baltimore City Police just shared pictures of a man they are trying to identify in the shooting of a 13-year-old girl Monday night, just blocks from Hopkins Hospital in southeast Baltimore. Take a good look at this. That girl is still fighting for her life. Police say a gunman fired at a car but hit the girl, who was part of a larger group of people standing outside a store on Fayette Street. We are posting these pictures on FOX baltimore.com so you can get a better look and share pictures to help police. We'll have more tonight at 10.
Exclusive 10-day forecast. 68 tomorrow. Clouds thicken up. The remnants of Nicole rain, maybe even some thunderstorms, even an outside chance of some severe weather on Friday. That goes into Friday night. Saturday, cold front passes through, so breezy. Could see a spot shower or two, although I think a lot of the day is rain-free, dropping only to 50 for a high on Sunday. Colder, blustery. Could even see a stray spritz. 47 for Monday, 48, a shower or two later in the day, Tuesday into Tuesday night. And then it looks below average, highs only near 50 to wrap up next week.
And finally tonight, you may have seen some of Maryland's famous landmarks looking a little bit different this week. Here's a look at M&T Bank Stadium lit up in green. It is all part of Operation Greenlight to celebrate Veterans Day this week. The University of Maryland Medical System also illuminating all of its hospitals in green. Governor Larry Hogan says the initiative supports military veterans and raises awareness about veterans affairs. Well, that's all for Fox 45 News at 6. Family Feud is next. Will there be a Baltimore family featured on tonight's episode? We hope so. We'll see you back here tonight at 10. Have a good night.